Men and women almost never drank together before Prohibition. Maybe at occasional dinner parties of the rich, because the saloon was a male-only institution. But the speakeasy, where there was no law enforced of any kind, became different. And if you have a little jazz band and somebody's, you know, going to play the Charleston, you're going to have women and men together. There's a real liberation for women and liberation of behavior that takes place then. An independence that said, you know, he can drink, I can drink too. And that wouldn't have happened before Prohibition.
Joining us now for the interview is the great Ken Burns. His new documentary, Prohibition, premieres this Sunday, October 2nd on PBS. Ken, it is so great to have you back here. Thank you for coming in.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You know from our offline relationship that I am vaguely obsessed with Carrie Nation.
Exactly.
Carrie Nation and the Prohibitionists, and this idea that there could be a big, successful American political movement based around their own supposed superior morality and everybody else in America having bad morality. How do you win a majoritarian fight when that's your basic message?
Well, you start off with a real social problem, which is drunkenness, alcoholism, we'd call it today, and we were drinking 5-6 times more than we did now. People would drink it for breakfast, like John Adams, and it was a big social problem, and people wanted it. It was agency for women outside the home that they could talk about it. But then it got hijacked by this incredible organization called the Anti-Saloon League, and they are the single greatest lobbying organization in the history of the United States. They make the NRA look like they're still in short pants and need a lesson or two. It's a phenomenal thing, and we're not told about that. We're distracted by flappers dancing on tabletops. We're distracted by an interest in the gangsters, when in fact this was the first culture war. And they amassed this strange alliance so that by the time Prohibition went into effect, there were progressives as well as conservatives supporting it for all sorts of reasons. The NAACP, but also the Ku Klux Klan, the Wobblies, and the industrialists. And what they all saw was that banning alcohol would be this panacea, this magic bullet that would cure all of society's ills. And, of course, it wasn't the exact opposite thing. Billy Sunday, the evangelist, said that if we pass this thing, if it gets thing, hell will forever be for rent. And in fact, they were lining up SRO to go into hell as a result of that. I mean, I think it was always Prohibition for somebody else. As our film begins with this great quote from Mark Twain, nothing so needs reforming as other people's habits.
As other people's habits. And there are two sides to this. And one of the interesting things about the political dynamics here is that nobody is standing up for the people of bad morals, right?
Yes, right?
People who want to drink in as powerful a way as the people who are standing up as the moralists here, as the dries. There are, of course, like the Brewers Association,
yes,
so, who are trying to make a case for their own industry, and it's a clearly self-interested case.
That's the problem, when you have moral authority on one side saying, let's improve society, let's get rid of the evil drink, the evil saloons, and you're saying, I kind of like to get a drink now and then, and this is my business, don't take it away from me. And for a while the Brewers sort of held their own because upwards of 70% of internal federal revenues to Uncle Sam came from taxing beer and liquor. And so the conservative Anti-Saloon League shrewdly allies themselves with the progressive moment, who are seeking a redistribution of wealth because of the imbalance to pass an income tax amendment. And then all of a sudden, you've disconnected Uncle Sam from the booze industry. And then if you got the convenience of World War I, where all Germans are enemies, beer equals treason, we changed the name of sauerkraut to Liberty Cabbage. Sound familiar?
I was just going to say, freedom toast. I can feel it right now, yeah.
It's just what happens, and it tumbles in, and we have it, and we wake up, and we wake up with a hangover, because most people think, well, I'll still have my beer and wine. I'll be able to do that. But the draconian law that was passed, the Volstead Act, to administer the amendment, was defining alcohol as 0.5%. And then it had other places where there were loopholes that gave the opportunities to criminals who were disorganized until Prohibition to become organized and create the worst unintended consequence of this all, which is the existence of organized crime.
And on the issue of organized crime, I mean, I feel like when we talk about Prohibition now, and there has been more talk about it recently, I think because there's been sort of a cocktail renaissance and it's a popular time in American history right now.
Flashy, yeah.
But everybody everybody always tries to make prohibition of alcohol an allegory for some other thing that we ban now. But if you just take it on its own terms without making it a metaphor.
That's right. For marijuana or anything else, just leave it.
Take it on its own terms. Are there things now in our culture and our politics that are direct legacies of prohibition itself? I mean, you mentioned organized crime.
Yeah, I think organized crime is the biggest and loudest one. I think female alcoholism, because women, as you said in your lead, didn't drink in saloons. And so all of a sudden they were certainly drinking in speakeasies, and alcohol consumption in women went up significantly in the course of it and stayed up. So these are the pernicious legacies. The good thing that came out of this is that we have a healthy suspicion of that group that's saying, hey, I've got the solution again. If you just do this blankety-blank amendment, everything will be all right. The sun will shine and everything will be fine again. And we don't do that because we know we've got this built-in memory of this time. But if you think about prohibition, it echoes with everything today. Single-issue campaigns, demonization of immigrants, loss of civil discourse, smear campaigns in presidential election cycles, a whole group of people who feel like they've lost control of their country and want to take it back, warrantless wiretaps. What's the correct role of government? I mean, stop me. You can go on and on and on, and this is not a rehearsal. This is human nature. We are embedded in us this impulse to control, but in our country, in which most amendments, all amendments, are expanding human freedom, besides the ones that tinker with the mechanics of the Constitution, how long you can serve, when you take office. This one is the only one that narrowed it, that restricted it, and the only one, thank goodness, that got repealed. I mean, the good news is 13 years, almost 14 years, sounds like a long time, and everyone was stunned as how quickly the ratification of prohibition came in. But it went out even faster. The repeal was just even more swift, because we just run up against the inherent hypocrisy of people who believe in absolute moral certainty. It may have worked at the edges in the single-issue wedge campaign, because that's the purpose of a wedge issue, is to divide. But once it's practically applied, then the emperor has no clothes anymore, and it's the poor and the working class and the recent immigrants that are being unfairly targeted. The rich can stockpile their own booze and have it for as long as they want. People are being killed with shootouts with federal agents. Innocent passers-by. There's organized crime and all the attendant corruption that comes from that. The President of the United States, Warren G. Harding, who's for it, nevertheless has a bootlegger coming to the White House. So, at the end, the combination of the depression and hypocrisy, we said, so why did we end the fifth largest industry?
It is such a radical social experiment to even conceive about this country, but to have done it for 13 years is astonishing. And now we know more about it than we ever otherwise would had you, Ken Burns, not decided to take this on. Thank you for doing this documentary on this subject. I'm so fascinated by it, and I couldn't be happier that you've done it. I think it's just great, and it's so entertaining. Thank you.
Well, I also have to shout out Lynn Novick, who's the co-director and co-producer in this, who's been my longtime collaborator, and this is equally hers, and she added an extraordinary dimension to trying to tell this story and getting it right. This is a kind of a fever dream of 14 years of this is us?
Seriously. Ken Burns, director and producer of the new documentary Prohibition. The first episode airs this Sunday, 8 p.m. on PBS. I can personally recommend it. It's awesome. Ken, thanks very much. Good luck.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. When InfoBunk needs debunking, it is time for a trip, naturally, to Debunction Junction. That is coming up.